This is not just about money. This is about betrayal. Those words didn't just fill the courtroom. They pierced it. They reverberated off the walls, bounced off the shiny wood benches, and landed hard in the hearts of everyone in the room. The gavel had fallen moments before, but silence still hung, heavy and oppressive. Even the ceiling fans above seemed to halt their slow turns, as if the very air comprehended the seriousness of what was happening. Every seat was filled. The courtroom had become more than a room of justice. It was a stage, and on that stage sat a family broken by years of secrets, betrayal, and broken promises. On one side were Meri, Christine, Janelle, and their children. Their faces carried the weight of sleepless nights and decades of unspoken hurt. Each of them bore scars unseen by the world. Scars etched not by physical scars, but by neglect, silence, and betrayal. On the other side was Kody Brown. He was not the Kody the world remembered. The man who once pranced proudly across TV screens, introducing America to the concept of polygamy wrapped in smiles and confidence. No. The man sitting at the defendant's table was different. His posture was slumped. His once piercing eyes darted nervously from wall to wall, avoiding eye contact with the faces he knew so well. His hands fidgeted, grasping the edge of the table as if it was the only thing holding him above water. The cameras weren't here this time. The lights, the stage smiles, the carefully scripted interviews, gone. What was left was raw reality. The truth. The words, "This is not just about money, this is about betrayal," hung in the air, refusing to dissipate. They came not from an attorney, nor from the judge. They came from Meri herself, the wife who had once stood by Kody's side, believing in him when no one else would. The courtroom audience, filled with journalists, local townsfolk, and curious onlookers, leaned forward as one. They had come expecting drama. What they didn't expect was raw heartbreak. Meri's eyes were locked on Kody, her voice trembling yet steady enough to carry the weight of decades. Those who had followed their family on television could see it immediately. This was not the same Meri who had once smiled quietly in the background, swallowing her pain. This was a woman who had been broken, rebuilt, and now stood ready to confront the man who shattered her life. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, beads of sweat glistening at his temple. He tried to compose himself, straightening his posture, but it was too late. The mask he had worn for years was slipping, piece by piece, under the piercing gaze of those who once trusted him most. The judge sat in silence, his hand hovering near the gavel, but he didn't interrupt. He knew this was more than testimony. It was the raw beginning of something that would shake everyone in the room. The children in the audience couldn't hold back their emotions. Some sat rigid, staring at their father with eyes full of anger and hurt. Others looked down, their hands twisting nervously in their laps, torn between love and betrayal. Gwen, her jaw clenched, stared straight at Kody, unflinching. Others, like Gabriel and Peden, shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but unable to look away. Christine, seated behind Meri, reached forward and placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. That single touch carried volumes. Sisterhood, solidarity, and years of shared suffering. Janelle, quiet as always, wiped a single tear before it could escape down her cheek. The air was electric, charged with unspoken words. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked softly, capturing every flinch, every tear, every crack in the once unshakable facade of the Brown family. Kody's mind reeled. He could feel the pressure of the room bearing down on him. His chest constricted. He wanted to rise, to yell, to take control the way he always had. But something within him warned him this was different. This wasn't a family meeting he could control with raised hands and loud words. This was a courtroom. This was truth. And truth had no use for manipulation. Meri took a sharp breath, steadying herself before she went on. For years I told myself to be patient, to suffer, to believe that one day he would return, not just physically but emotionally. I believed him when he said family was everything. I believed him when he vowed love and protection. But what did we receive? Silence, coldness, and ultimately, betrayal. The words struck Kody like rocks. His face contorted, his jaw clenching as if he wanted to retort. But he remained seated, his hands tightening on the table. The judge leaned back in his chair, watching intently. He wasn't merely hearing testimony. He was witnessing a family disintegrate before his eyes. And yet beneath the heavy silence, something deeper was brewing. A shift, a realization among those in the room, that this was not merely a trial about money, contracts, or secret accounts. This was about hearts. Hearts that had been broken, abandoned, and discarded. A mother's heart that had been left alone in the middle of the night. A child's heart that had pleaded for attention, only to be greeted by absence. A family's heart that had been promised love, only to be given betrayal. Kody looked around the room again. His eyes inadvertently met Gwen's for a split second. The pain in her eyes seared through him. He looked away hastily, but it was too late. That one moment spoke volumes. He knew what he had done, and they knew it too. Outside the courthouse, a storm was brewing. Dark clouds rolled in, thunder rumbling softly in the distance. Inside, the storm had already descended. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the weight of history being made. Reporters exchanged wide-eyed glances. Even the bailiff, a seasoned man who had seen countless trials, stood straighter, his jaw tight. "This is not just about money. This is about betrayal," Meri repeated, her voice stronger now, louder, echoing across the courtroom. "It is about a man who turned his back on the very people who gave him everything. It is about broken promises, broken homes, and broken hearts." Her words were fire. Each syllable burned through the air, leaving no one untouched. For Kody, the reality was dawning. This wasn't just a trial he could spin into his favor. This wasn't another episode where he could narrate his side of the story. This was judgment, and judgment didn't care about excuses. The room remained silent, every soul trapped in the weight of Meri's truth. And so it began. The trial that would not just decide Kody Brown's future in the eyes of the law, but in the hearts of his family. A trial not of contracts and dollars, but of love, betrayal, and the cost of neglect. As the gavel tapped softly, signaling the continuation of proceedings, one truth was undeniable. This was no ordinary trial. This was the reckoning of Kody Brown. The judge's gavel struck again, but this time it wasn't to silence the crowd. It was to call the first witness. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "Meri Brown, please take the stand." The room held its breath. Every eye turned to the woman slowly rising from her seat. Her hands trembled, but her steps were steady. Years of pain seemed to weigh down her shoulders. Yet in her eyes there was something fierce, something that had been buried for too long, finally ready to emerge. Meri Brown walked to the witness stand. For decades, she had been introduced to the world as the first wife, the loyal one, the quiet one, the one who always stood in the background, while the others took the spotlight. But today she wasn't just a wife. She was a survivor, and she was prepared to tell the truth. She placed her oath with a trembling hand. Her voice was barely audible as she whispered, "I do." Then, as she sat in the witness chair, the courtroom fell silent. The judge nodded slightly, encouraging her to speak. Meri swallowed hard. Her eyes flicked toward the defendant's table. Kody sat there, his jaw clenched, refusing to meet her eyes. For years she had craved his attention. Today she didn't want it. She wanted the truth. She clutched the microphone. Her first words shattered like glass. "Your Honor," she started, "I gave my life to this family." Her voice trembled, but she went on. "I believed in Kody. I believed in us. I believed in a dream that was supposed to be founded on love, faith, and unity. But what I got instead was betrayal." A gasp ran through the crowd. Christine's eyes welled up with tears immediately. Janelle dropped her head, her shoulders weighed down by unspoken memories. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, feeling the weight of her words. Meri's voice strengthened with each word, as if the burden of years was finally lifting from her chest. "I was there from the start. I was the first to say yes to him, the first to believe in his vision of family. I stood by him when no one else got it. I defended him. I trusted him. I sacrificed everything for him. And what did I get? Loneliness, silence, and nights crying myself to sleep while he gave his love to someone else." Her words were like knives. Each one pierced deep into the quiet heart of the courtroom. She paused, her chest heaving as she struggled to calm her voice. Her eyes shone as she glanced toward the children. I watched my children cry for his attention. I begged him, just begged him, to sit with them, to talk with them, to be a father. But he was too busy, too distracted, too in love with creating a life that didn't include us. Gwen shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her jaw clenched. Her siblings looked down, their hurt etched on their faces. They didn't need Meri's testimony to know it was true. They had lived it. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his lips compressing into a thin line. His hands were clenched on the table so tightly that his knuckles were white. He wanted to talk, to defend himself, but the judge raised a hand, telling him to be quiet. Meri took a deep breath, her voice cracking again. Do you know what it feels like, Your Honor? To share your husband with others and still be the one who is invisible. To be the one he forgets, the one he pushes aside, the one who cries alone while he laughs with someone else. That was my life. His for decades. And I endured it because I believed in his promises. Her tears flowed freely now, but she didn't stop. The strength in her voice only increased. But it wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just emotional abandonment. It was lies. Kody built secret accounts. He moved money in ways I didn't understand. While we struggled to make ends meet, he was securing his own future, his own wealth, and he did it while telling us we were a team. He betrayed not just me, but every single person in this family. The courtroom gasped again. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens racing across their notepads. Cameras clicked, capturing the moment Meri's truth finally broke free. Christine covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Janelle reached for her daughter's hand, squeezing tightly. Even Robin, the wife who had once been favored, looked shaken, her eyes wet with tears she couldn't hide. Meri turned toward Kody now, her eyes blazing with a mixture of heartbreak and defiance. For years she had begged for his attention. Today she demanded it. Kody, she said, her voice firm. You said family was everything. You said we were creating something sacred, but you left us. You left me. You left your children. And now you want to stand here and pretend to be the victim? No, you are not the victim. We are. The courtroom was silent. The only sound was the muffled cry of one of the younger children in the back. Kody's face reddened. He opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, Meri went on. I am not here for revenge. I am not here to ruin you. I am here because the truth is important. Because my children need to know that their hurt was not their fault. Because I need to reclaim the voice I lost for decades. This is not about money. This is about betrayal. And betrayal is what you gave us. Her last words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. The judge leaned back, visibly shaken. The jury refused to meet Kody's eyes, their faces hardening with each passing moment. Meri dropped her head, tears streaming freely now, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. For the first time, she wasn't silent. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She had spoken her truth, and nothing, no lies, no manipulation, no television cameras could take it away. As she descended from the witness stand, the room burst into whispers. The bailiff called for order, but the energy had changed. Everyone in that room knew it. The trial wasn't just about legal issues anymore. It was about the soul of a family, broken and laid bare. Meri sat back down. Christine reached out, her hand gripping Meri's tightly. Janelle put her other hand over theirs. For the first time in years, the three women sat together, not as wives fighting for scraps of love, but as sisters bound by survival and truth. And as Kody sat at the defendant's table, his eyes on the floor, he knew something deep down. The family he once controlled was gone, and the world had finally heard the truth. The air was thick with Meri's words. Her testimony hung in the air like smoke after a fire, impossible to escape. The silence that followed was oppressive. Then the judge's voice shattered it. Mr. Brown, he said calmly, you may respond. All eyes were on Kody. For a moment he didn't budge. He sat stiff at the defendant's table, his hands clenched on the edge so tightly that his knuckles shone white. His breathing was ragged, his chest rising and falling too rapidly. It was the first time anyone had ever seen Kody Brown appear small, but then like a man refusing to go under. He pushed himself up from his chair. Slowly, deliberately, he stood. His jaw was clenched, his shoulders squared. He swept the room with his eyes, forcing himself to meet those who once loved him. The courtroom held its breath. Kody's voice boomed, louder than it had to be. "This is madness," he bellowed. The words ricocheted off the wooden panels, startling even the bailiff. His tone wasn't calm or rational. It was desperate, shaking with fear he was trying to pass off as anger. "I sacrificed everything for this family," he went on, his arms spreading wide, as if attempting to encompass the entire courtroom. "I worked myself to the bone. I built houses. I brought home food. I gave you all a name, a life, a future." His words rang out, but the weight behind them felt feeble. His wives and children didn't nod in agreement. They didn't soften. Instead, they sat still, their faces carved in stone. Christine muttered under her breath, just loud enough for those around her to hear. "You gave us a future. You gave us heartbreak." Kody's head whipped toward her, his eyes blazing, but Christine didn't blink. She met his gaze with the strength of a woman who had suffered too much to fear him anymore. He turned back toward the judge, his voice rising again. "And now they stand here, pointing fingers, painting me as some monster, because I chose to follow my heart. That is not a crime. That is not neglect. That is life." Gasps spread through the crowd. The jurors looked at each other. Kody's words weren't having the impact he had hoped for. Robin, the wife who had been his favorite, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She looked away, her eyes welling up with tears. She had stood up for him for years, but even she couldn't deny what was unfolding before her. Kody's face turned red. He pounded his palm on the defense table, the loud crackle making everyone jump. "I am not a criminal," he bellowed. "I am a man who did his best." The judge raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. The jury remained still. The silence that followed his outburst was more deafening than his shout. From the gallery, one of his children, Garrison, muttered bitterly, "Your best wasn't enough." The words weren't intended to be heard, but they cut through the strained silence, hitting Kody like a slap. Kody's eyes scanned the room, looking for sympathy, but finding none. Meri glared at him with tear-stained cheeks, her hurt undeniable. Janelle's lips were pressed into a hard line, her disappointment written on her face. Christine's eyes blazed with quiet anger, and the children, oh the children, looked at him not with love, but with something colder: betrayal. Kody threw up his hands in frustration. "You want to talk about betrayal?" he spat. "How about the betrayal of a family turning against their own father, their own husband? I gave you everything, and you repay me with lies, with accusations, with hatred." His words cracked, his voice shaking now. What had begun as a performance of strength was disintegrating into a display of desperation. The judge finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Brown, this is a courtroom. Control yourself." Kody froze. He swallowed hard, realizing how far he had fallen. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't sit back down. He had to keep talking, even if the words were killing him. His voice dropped, trembling now. "I was a man trying to hold everything together. Do you know what it's like to bear the weight of 4 marriages, 18 children, the world judging you every second of your life? I bore that weight, alone. And now, instead of gratitude, I get this?" His words hung in the air, but they didn't elicit sympathy. Instead, they sounded hollow, self-serving. The courtroom could feel it. The jurors could feel it. Even Kody himself could feel it. Gwen's eyes blazed as she leaned toward Christine. "He still doesn't get it. He doesn't see us. He never did." Christine squeezed her daughter's hand, her lips trembling. She didn't need to say a word. She knew Gwen was right. Kody tried again, his voice cracking. "I loved you all. I did. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe not the way you wanted. But I loved you. And now you stand here crucifying me for being human?" The word loved struck the children like a blow. Past tense. Loved. Gwen's face set in a hard line. Gabriel turned away, fighting back tears. Even Isabel, usually reserved, shook her head in shock. The silence that followed was oppressive. At last the judge leaned forward. "Mr. Brown, this is not about defending your pride. This is about responding to very real charges. Do you have evidence? Do you have facts? Or only words?" Kody froze. His mouth opened then closed again. For once, the man who always had something to say had nothing. The room seemed to close in around him. The weight of his wife's tears, his children's disappointment, the jury's hard stares. It all pressed down on him like a suffocating tide. He slowly sank back into his chair. His hands trembled as he reached for a glass of water. But he didn't take a sip. He only sat there staring at the table. His once proud shoulders slumped in defeat. In that moment, everyone saw it. Kody Brown wasn't the strong patriarch he had always pretended to be. He wasn't the head of a family. He wasn't a victim of betrayal. He was a man exposed, desperate, and completely alone. And for the first time in his life, no one was listening. The courtroom had fallen into an uncomfortable silence after Kody's desperate defense. His outburst still hung in the air, but instead of power, it stank of desperation. The jurors sat stiff, unmoved. His wives looked tired, their eyes puffy from years of tears. And then, a soft, trembling voice broke the silence. "Your Honor," Gwen said, rising slowly from her seat. All eyes turned to her. Gwen Brown, Kody's daughter, stood tall though her hands trembled. Her chest rose and fell quickly, nerves evident in every movement. But there was a fire in her eyes, one that no one had ever seen before. The judge looked at her warily. "Miss Brown, are you ready to testify?" Gwen nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I need to." The bailiff led her to the witness stand. Every step she took sounded like a drumbeat through the charged courtroom. She wasn't moving forward. She was moving toward truth, toward confrontation, toward the moment she had been waiting for her whole life. When she arrived at the stand, she took her oath. Her voice broke on the words, but she didn't stumble. Then she sat down, holding a folder tightly in her lap. The courtroom waited. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Gwen raised her eyes, fixing them directly on her father. "Dad," she said quietly. But the quiet traveled farther than any scream. "You always said family was everything. But you lied." Gasps ran through the audience. Kody stiffened, his face paling. He opened his mouth, but the judge held up a hand sharply. "Mr. Brown, you will be silent while your daughter testifies." Kody shut his mouth, but his jaw twitched with held-back anger. Gwen's hands shook as she opened the folder. Her fingers ran over the papers inside. Bank statements, contracts, documents that held the weight of hidden secrets. She pulled them out and placed them before the judge. "These are records," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Evidence that while we struggled, while Mom cried herself to sleep, while kids begged for your time and love, you were hiding money. You were creating secret accounts. You were looking out for yourself, not us." The judge read the papers, his face somber. Reporters scribbled wildly. The jurors leaned forward, their interest piqued. Christine pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling. Janelle closed her eyes, whispering something under her breath. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps a thank you. Meri gazed at Gwen, her face crumbling, pride and sorrow mingling. But it wasn't the documents that shattered the courtroom. It was Gwen's voice. Her tears fell freely now, but she didn't hide them. She looked directly at Kody, her words cutting deeper than any evidence ever could. "Dad," she whispered, "you didn't just stop loving Mom. You stopped loving us." The words shattered what little composure was left in the room. Gasps, sobs. Even the bailiff looked away, his eyes brimming with tears. "You were supposed to protect us," Gwen went on, her voice shaking but firm enough to cut through the silence. "You were supposed to teach us what love was. Instead, you taught us what abandonment is. While you were pursuing new dreams, we were left behind, forgotten, invisible." Kody's face contorted. His lips quivered, his eyes glassy, but whether from guilt or rage, no one could say. Gwen shook her head slowly, incredulity heavy in every movement. "You told us family was everything. But for you, we were never enough." Christine dissolved completely, sobbing into her hands. Meri leaned forward, covering her face as her shoulders convulsed. Janelle reached out and took Gwen's arm, squeezing it in silent support. Even Robin, who had defended Kody to the bitter end, wept quietly, unable to deny the truth of Gwen's words. The jurors looked shocked. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others gazed at Kody with eyes full of judgment. Gwen's voice grew stronger, every word carrying years of bottled-up pain. "We were children begging for our father's love. Do you know how it feels to watch the man you call dad walk past you, ignoring you, while he pours everything into someone else. Do you know what it's like to hear him say he loves you, but see nothing in his actions? We know. We lived it. And it broke us. Her words cut through the courtroom, like a knife. Kody slumped in his seat, his hands gripping his knees, his face pale and slick with sweat. The silence that followed was agonizing. Gwen's voice shook again, as she delivered the final blow. You betrayed us, Dad. You didn't just betray Mom. You betrayed your children. And no matter what happens here today, we will never forget it. The last word hung in the room. Never. For a long moment no one moved. The only sound was the muffled sobs of family members and the frantic scratching of reporters' pens. And then, finally, Gwen dropped her head, tears falling onto her lap. Her body trembled with the release of years of silence, years of bearing a pain too great for a child. Christine moved forward, her arms around Gwen, before the bailiff could intervene. The judge paused, then let it happen. Christine's sobs filled the room, as she whispered, "You were so brave, so brave." Meri reached out too, her shaking hand on Gwen's shoulder. "You spoke for all of us," she whispered. Even Janelle, normally stoic, wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, her voice cracking as she said, "We needed this. We needed your truth." And Kody, he sat there, his empire crumbling before him, looking at the daughter who had just stripped him bare before the world. His lips moved, but no words emerged. His eyes, once full of authority, now overflowed with something else, fear. For the first time, Kody Brown wasn't the patriarch, wasn't the leader, wasn't the man in charge. He was just a father faced with the truth he had spent his life running from. And everyone could see it. The courtroom was no longer silent. Gwen's words still hung in the air like smoke after a fire, and the aftermath was thick with sobs, whispers, and the sound of breaking hearts. The judge, a stern man who had remained impassive through days of testimony, now rubbed his temple slowly, as if even he could sense the unbearable weight of what had just transpired. The gavel lay before him. Everyone knew what came next, yet no one was ready for the moment. "Order in the court," the judge said firmly, his voice ringing through the room. But order was impossible. Meri held Gwen's hand, Christine still shook, and Janelle wiped her cheeks again and again, trying to steady herself. Robin sat frozen, her mascara streaked, her usual defense of Kody swallowed by the undeniable truth. Kody Brown slumped in his chair. His chest heaved rapidly, as if he was struggling to breathe in a room that had closed in around him. Gone was the swagger, the confidence, the charm he had once used to command every room he entered. He appeared, small, defeated. The judge cleared his throat. "This court has heard days of testimony. We have witnessed evidence. We have heard from wives, from children, and from Mr. Brown himself. What has been uncovered here is not merely financial dishonesty, but emotional destruction." The words hit like rocks. Kody winced. The judge went on. "Marriage, family, responsibility. These are sacred vows. But what I have heard is a pattern of abandonment, of betrayal, and of reckless disregard for the emotional welfare of those who trusted you most." The jurors nodded somberly. Their faces said it all. The verdict was no longer in doubt. Kody attempted to speak, his voice raw. "Your Honor, please. I never intended to." "Mr. Brown," the judge cut him off sharply. "You will be silent until judgment is passed." Kody's lips clamped shut. His eyes flicked to Gwen, then to Meri, Christine, Janelle, and finally Robin. Each set of eyes he met was filled not with love, but with disappointment, hurt, and a cold finality he could no longer avoid. The judge raised the gavel, his voice steady. "This court finds Kody Brown guilty of financial impropriety and liable for the emotional damages caused to his family." The gavel came down once. Bang! Gasps filled the air, but the judge wasn't done. "Furthermore," he said, his voice heavy with finality, "this court acknowledges the irreparable damage done to the emotional fabric of this family. You, Mr. Brown, have failed in your role as a husband and as a father. This judgment is not merely legal but symbolic, a recognition that your betrayal has consequences that cannot be ignored." Bang! The gavel came down again. Meri let out a sob that became laughter, broken, but free. For the first time in years, Her tears weren't tears of pain, they were tears of release. Christine hugged Gwen closer, whispering, "We did it. We finally told the truth." Janelle held her daughter's hand, her face wet but firm, as if years of suffering in silence had finally been validated. And Robin, she sat still, her tears streaming, finally unable to deny what she had fought for so long. The truth had come crashing down too hard, too loud, too irrefutable. Cody's head dropped lower. He wasn't just a man who had lost a case, he was a man who had lost his entire identity. His wives, his children, his authority, his legacy, all taken away in one judgment. The courtroom slowly emptied, but the family remained. Gwen stood tall despite her tears, walking past her father without a glance back. Christine and Janelle followed, their hands clasped with their children's, forming a picture of strength and unity. Meri hesitated, turning her head slightly toward Kody. Her voice was soft but sharp enough to cut through what was left of him. "You thought you could break us, Kody? But in the end, you only broke yourself." She turned away before he could answer, her footsteps echoing as she walked toward freedom. Kody sat in his chair, his eyes fixed on the empty doorway where his family had vanished. The room was still now, except for the scratching of reporters and the distant hum of voices outside. The bailiff approached. "Mr. Brown, it's time to go." But Kody didn't budge. His eyes were glassy, his lips shaking as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. For the first time, the man who once ruled a family of dozens sat alone, stripped of everything he had once boasted about. He had come to court thinking he could talk his way out, sweet-talk his way through, or at least bully his family into silence. But instead, the silence of his children, the tears of his wives, and the truth of his daughter had destroyed him utterly. And that was the real verdict. Not the judge's decision, not the jury's verdict, but the inescapable fact that the man who had it all had nothing left. As the doors closed on his family, the gravity of the moment fell fully on him. The patriarch was gone. The empire of polygamy he had constructed on promises and domination had fallen, leaving only ashes and remorse. The judge's words rang in his head. "You have failed your duty as a husband and as a father." The toughest verdict of all wasn't on paper. It wasn't even spoken from the bench. It was in the eyes of his wives, in the voice of his daughter, in the silence of children who no longer looked to him as their father. That silence would haunt him for the rest of his life. And as the echo of the gavel faded, Kody Brown knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was not just the end of a trial. This was the end of him.